Hi, my name is Marissa Presley, and I do community education for Human Options. Human Options is a nonprofit agency where we provide a safe haven and life changing services for all individuals who are victims and survivors of domestic violence. We also want to work with the community, as we are doing here today, to try to break the cycle of violence. Our objectives today is an increased ability to define teen dating violence or teen dating abuse. We are going to identify the methods of reproductive and sexual coercion. We are going to describe mandatory reporting laws, confidentiality, and how to document that. We're also going to talk about appropriately screening teens for teen dating violence. And we are going to share with you some local resources and how you can best offer these referrals to victims and survivors. What is teen dating violence? A lot of people think that it's similar to domestic violence. There is a difference, though, in the age of the person doing the harm and, of course, the age of the victim survivor. It is a pattern of abusive behavior. It could be anywhere from physical to mental, verbal, emotional, and it is used by one individual as a means to exert power and control over another. Each year, unfortunately, 1.5 million teenagers are affected nationwide. This includes boys. High school girls experiencing dating abuse are 4 to 6 times more likely to become pregnant. I am one of those high school girls. I was 15 years old when I was first pregnant. I didn't know to call it domestic violence or teen dating abuse at the time, but now looking back, I realized that I was being victimized by my partner at the time. The statistics indicate that today, 1 in 3 teenagers will be experiencing some type of violence in their dating relationship. This will include physical violence, emotional, psychological, mental. We're going to talk about those in a bit. Also, 1 in 10 teenagers today are being physically beaten up by a partner. That is punching, kicking, slapping, pushing, shoving, breaking of belongings, stalking, and rape. In the LGBTQ community, we don't tend to talk about this community too often because it's one of those things that people don't think it happens because we don't talk about it. But unfortunately, over 42% of LGBTQ youth are being physically abused. If you compare this to a heterosexual population of only 29%, that's a huge jump. Also, in this community, over 23% of LGBTQ youth are being victimized sexually by their dating partner, and this compares to over 12% in the heterosexual community. We can identify dating abuse in many different ways. When you are working with a patient, you are probably going to try to look for signs like bruises or scarring or even x-rays. However, a lot of us, we know how to hide our injuries very well, and some of the injuries might not be physical. They might be emotional, and the scars will be deep inside. Physical abuse includes anything from punching, slapping, kicking, shoving, blocking one's exit so that they don't escape, breaking personal belongings, threatening to hurt somebody physically. Verbal abuse, it's not so much somebody calling another individual bad words or degrading them or humiliating them. It's also how are they being spoken to? What's the tone of voice that they are using? Emotional abuse is a little bit more easy to identify because this is when the person doing the harm is maybe cheating on the partner. They are also maybe lying. They tend to lie a lot. They hurt the partner's feelings. Psychological abuse is also called mental abuse. And today we also call it gaslighting. This is where the person doing the harm tends to play mind games with the victim survivor. They also might shift the reality of the victim survivor, and they also might tend to blame the victim survivor for things that they didn't do. They question, they interrogate the victim survivor. Sexual abuse, which we will also discuss further in another slide, is not only forcing an individual to commit sexual acts that they are not really interested in committing, but also forcing the victim to participate in sexual acts they don't want to. Maybe forcing the victim to make crude jokes about individuals and their body parts, making fun of one's gender, putting down one's gender continuously and regularly. Financial abuse. A lot of people say to me that domestic violence, teen dating abuse, or IPV, intimate partner violence, might only happen in a certain population, but I've seen it happen to billionaires and I've seen it happen to lower economic status level. And the thing about financial abuse in a teen relationship is that it doesn't sound like abuse because it's like, hey, can I borrow $5? Can you give me a 10? I need $20 for gas. But what happens is eventually the person doing the harm is not asking for the money anymore. They're demanding it. Financial abuse is very tricky, and there are laws against that. Digital and technological abuse. For me, as a community educator for the last 11 years, I find this to be one of the most harmful types of abuse and mostly underreported because a lot of people, there's too much shame and embarrassment to report something like that. So getting threatening text messages, asking the victim survivor to provide you with their password, maybe making threatening messages via text or email. Also, revenge porn law now is when you, as a person doing the harm, take a photo, a nude photo or a sex video of somebody that you used to date, you are currently dating, you used to date and had a child with, and you send that photo electronically to anyone after the breakup. Today, in the state of California, that's against the law. Spiritual abuse. This is twofold. One way to spiritually abuse a dating partner is to make fun of their religion, their holidays, their traditions, maybe force them to believe or to praise a god or goddess that they are not familiar with. But the reason I think that spiritual abuse is so dangerous, it is because one person can break down the human spirit of another little by little with comments, with maybe giving the person the cold shoulder, maybe putting down their opinions, maybe crushing their dreams. It could be something as little as minor as you will never achieve your goals, or stop dreaming, you could never do that. So the breaking down little by little of the human spirit is actually something that in domestic violence stays with the victim survivor for a long time. And not only does it affect the spirit, the psyche, but it can also affect the victim survivor in with their health, depression, anxiety, panic attacks. Reproductive coercion. This is something that I've actually seen happen a lot here in Orange County amongst teenagers. This is when there might not be consensual sex, or there is consensual sex, and the plan is to not get pregnant and use a condom, but the person doing the harm pokes a hole in the condom, or maybe the teen does get pregnant, they want to carry the baby to full term, but the person doing the harm forces them to get an abortion. Maybe it could also be that the person who did get pregnant does want to get that abortion, but now they are forced to carry that baby to term. So interfering with contraception, forced pregnancies. And continuing with reproductive and sexual coercion, among women reporting coerced sex, more than 1/3 were 15 years or younger at the time of their first coerced sexual experience. Again, going back to my story, this is something that was done to me at 15 years old. And also, 40% of all female adolescent patients who were seen in urban adolescent clinics had experienced IPV. Among teen mothers on public assistance who had experienced recent IPV, over 66% disclosed birth control sabotage. The cycle of violence. When I'm out doing presentations like these at local middle schools, high schools, colleges, or universities, I get a lot of emails when I get to this particular slide. This is the slide where people tend to realize that maybe they are in an unhealthy relationship, or they are in an abusive relationship, or used to be in a relationship like this. The cycle of violence does not always play out the same way for every single case. However, this is a model that will show you the dynamics of what a teen might be experiencing. You, as a medical professional, as a provider, might see a teenager in any one of these 3 stages, so keep that in mind. The first stage is the honeymoon stage. This is where the person doing the harm and the victim survivor are making plans for the future. There's butterflies in their stomach, they are cuddling, and everything seems to be going well. However, tension starts to build. This is stage number 2. The tension could look anything like slamming doors or cabinets, being more moody, more agitated, more often. Also, during the tension stage, the victim survivor is feeling like they are walking on eggshells. Maybe they are also being very careful with everything they say and everything they do so as not to cause anything to happen, maybe not to be a trigger. Stage number 2, the tension stage, can last anywhere from a few intense minutes to actual hours or days. Stage number 3 is the explosion. This is where the person doing the harm is standing over the victim, demanding answers, blaming the victim for things they never did, pushing or shoving, maybe blocking the victim's exit, threatening the victim, and it also leads to physical and sexual violence. If the victim survivor is able to survive the explosion stage, then what happens is that the honeymoon state begins again. This is called the makeup stage, the reconciliation stage. This is where the person doing the harm early on in the relationship will say something like, "I'm sorry, I will never do it again. Please forgive me. I promise to change. I brought you some flowers." The victim survivor gives the person doing the harm a chance, and that sets the cycle in motion. Not that it's the victim's fault who set the cycle in motion, but a lot of us, we give one person one chance, and then the tension begins again, and now they're stuck. If you become familiar with the cycle of violence, you'll be able to not only distinguish what stage your patient is going through, but also educate your patient on the cycle of violence. The teen hookup culture, what is this? In my era, we used to call it dating. Kids don't call it dating anymore. They call it hooking up. Hooking up, seeing each other, hanging out, going out, flirting, or they have a crush. So it is important to understand this adolescent language so that you can describe the dating behavior. When kids are hooking up in this culture, they have different partners. Sometimes they have multiple partners. Their hookup partner might be a friend, could be an ex-boyfriend or girlfriend, ex-partner, could be a total stranger. And some of the behaviors included in hooking up are anywhere from kissing and making out to oral sex, vaginal sex, anal sex, or maybe touching, groping the genital areas and the breast areas. Teen dating abuse affects the teen in so many different ways. Internalized chronic behaviors are maybe depression, anxiety, panic attacks, eating disorders, sleep deprivation, maybe insomnia. These effects can also be externalized behaviors. They demonstrate not only cruelty to animals and to authority figures, but also maybe to their siblings. They are very aggressive in their behavior. There are a lot of cases of misdiagnosed or overdiagnosed ADHD in these teens. They have difficulties maintaining social circles of friends, and a lot of these teenagers are also maybe using drugs, skipping school, dropping out of school, and having problems with maybe their teachers, their parents, counselors. One of the number one questions that people ask me when they find out that I work in this field is, why doesn't the victim just leave? I mean, if it was that bad, why don't they just break up? If it happened to me, I would never let a man hit me. Why doesn't she just leave? This is, of course, assuming that the victim survivor is a female, when in a lot of cases, the victim survivor is a male. The difference is that males most likely would not report it. I mean, who are they going to tell? If they tell their friends, they're going to be made fun of. If they tell their mother, mom's going to say, "I don't want you dating that girl anymore, son." So a lot of men, boys, they don't really have anybody to turn to. Over 78% of teenagers who are experiencing this type of abuse, they stay in the relationship. And a lot of them don't even report it. Some teenage girls stay in this abusive relationship for at least 2 years before they break up. Here are some of the barriers to why victims don't just break up. It could be anything from shame, embarrassment, maybe the stigma if they are a male survivor. Also, it could be that they don't know what a healthy relationship looks like. There's also threats. Maybe they love the abuser. I've had a lot of teenagers say to me, he or she is not always that bad. Sometimes they are really kind to me. Just the other day, they were nice to me. Or there's also the excuse that maybe things will get better, or denial, it's not that bad, it could be worse. I mean, look what my mom had to go through. At least it's not that bad for me. And then also there's the sex videos, sex photographs that when they are intimate, when they are cuddling, making plans for the future, this couple, they share with each other. And now after the breakup, it is actually used as a threat. And the victim feels that is the reason why they must stay in the abusive relationship. Mandatory reporting, documentation, and of course, limits of confidentiality. As your role as a provider, what does that mean for you? Minor consent law for family planning. At this time in the state of California, there is no lower age limit to receive family planning services. STI testing and treatment, a minor must be over 12 years old to receive these services without parental consent. Unfortunately, a minor under 12 years old must get parental consent to receive these services. Mandatory reporting of teen dating violence. If you suspect, all you have to do is have a suspicion that a minor is experiencing neglect, you must report that. You are mandated by law. Also, you must report any physical injury, sexual abuse, willful harming or endangerment, sexual exploitation like sex trafficking, pornography, or sexual coercion. By law, you must report statutory rape. A useful chart that details when sexual intercourse with a minor must be reported as child abuse can be found at this link. Appropriately screening teen patients for teen dating violence. How to screen. From the Institute for Safe Families, they have created RADAR. R for routinely screen all genders and all orientations at every visit. A, advise and ask. Please advise your client, your patient, of all the limits of confidentiality and do it in a non-judgmental manner. Document everything. What did the patient say in their own words and their own language, and describe all injuries in detail. A, assess. You are assessing the patient's safety. R for respond. Review all options and refer the patient to local domestic violence agencies. Routine screening. Again, every patient, every visit. According to the American Medical Association, they recommend that you, as a physician, should routinely screen for IPV. This is not intended for the victim survivor to disclose to you that they are, in fact, being victimized. This is just for you to establish a relationship with the victim survivor that at one point they will feel safe enough to come to you and disclose. Screening. Again, inform your teen of the limits of confidentiality. Direct questions should be asked whether or not you as a provider suspect that abuse has occurred. Conduct this assessment in private, away from the parents and away from the partner, and use terms, language that the teenager will understand. Here's a sample script. I am really glad that you came here today. Before we get started, I want you to know that everything you share with me is confidential, generally, with the exception of certain physical injuries, sexual abuse, but I hope that you're still comfortable enough to chat with me about these things. Do you have any questions? Ask the following questions. Are you currently hooking up with someone? Do you ever argue? And if you do, what does that look like? Is your partner ever jealous or suspicious of your actions? Do they keep tabs on you? Do they question? Do they interrogate you? Do you ever argue with your partner to avoid angering them? Has your partner ever used their body to intimidate you? Maybe they blocked your exit, punch a wall, kick a trash can. Have you been hit, punched, slapped, or pushed, or shoved by your intimate partner? If the patient says no, I am so glad that this is not happening to you. But again, feel free to talk to me if this changes. If the patient says yes, I am sorry this is happening to you, but I am so glad that you told me about it. We can help. And this is where you are actually going to assess for further safety. If a teen discloses to you that they are currently in an abusive relationship, at a minimum, their immediate safety is to be assessed. What does that mean? It means that you are going to ask this victim survivor, your patient, if the person doing the harm is in the office with them? Are they waiting in the car? Are they in the waiting room? Are they in any immediate danger? Does the person doing the harm have access to any weapons? And also encourage them, let them know that this is not their fault. Communicate with them what a healthy relationship should look like. Let them know that there are services available in Orange County. You might also offer an office so that they can make that phone call to our 24-hour crisis hotline here at Human Options. Somebody like me will be at the other end to pick up that phone and to help that teenager. We might also encourage the teenager to talk to somebody that they trust, maybe their parents, a teacher, or a coach. When you are documenting, use the patient's own words. Describe the specific abuse or the incident. Use those body maps to indicate all of the injuries. Use quotations. Make sure that you write down what resources you offered. And then I recommend and I encourage you to do a follow-up appointment just to see where they are now in this relationship. You can respond by offering the domestic violence hotlines. There are 4 local hotlines here in Orange County. You can also respond by giving them the legal resources available so that they can obtain a restraining order. And also, what are their housing options? Here on this screen are some local teen resources. And on this screen, you will see the 4 domestic violence agencies that are ready to help your patient. Love shouldn't hurt, and if it does, that's why we are here. Thank you so much.